been searching for a podcast that can motivate you, inspire you, and teach you about business and life all at the same time? Well, we've got you covered. This is Beyond the Blueprint with Matt. Whether you're seeking to unlock the secrets of real estate success or seeking guidance in the world of marketing and coaching, you're in the right place, helping to educate and motivate you through real-life experiences with work and life. We'll uncover stories like how a family's homeowning dream turned into their living truth, or how a struggling rookie transformed into a top realtor. You'll find there's always a way forward, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. This is Beyond the Blueprint with Matt. And now your host, Matt Sochi.
All right, welcome everybody to Beyond the Blueprint with Matt. I am very excited about this episode. So I thought, maybe some people want to get into my head a little bit as opposed to me getting into other people's heads. So I wanted to do a episode, won't take too long, but some questions I get asked a lot that I want to share with everybody. So hopefully everybody's engaged, and obviously if anybody has questions down the road, feel free to reach out and share them with me, and I'd be happy to answer them and just kind of switch things up a little gear here. So I was thinking the other day, I was like, how can we share a little bit more insight as opposed to me just sharing information, right? So the whole purpose of this podcast is to share ideas but also learn from them. So I came up with 4 questions that I feel like I get asked a lot, and I wanted to share those answers with everybody there, just to get a little idea, maybe get to know myself a little bit better, and maybe my train of thought and how I go along things. So the first one is what inspired you to start this podcast, and what has been your biggest learning experience since you began? So this podcast stemmed from a few different ideas. Me and my business partners had thought about doing a podcast on mortgages, and thought it was a great idea. We started doing some of them. However, when I started thinking is, how do you engage an audience when you're just giving information about financing? And it kind of stemmed into something else, which we will be rolling out, called Off the Clock. And that's where we interview different business owners or people, and we just kind of shoot the shit. Pretty cool, and that should be coming out soon. But for me with the podcast, I learned so much over the years between, and I'll tell you a little bit of backstory. So when I was 18, I became probably the youngest sales manager for a company called Radio Shack, and that company obviously is long gone. And if you could just imagine being 18 years old, just out of high school, and having to terminate people that were 2 or 3 times your age because of whatever, it was really difficult. And I learned a lot over the years from working there, is because there were a lot of different programs and mentorships that I went through, working with division vice presidents, regional leaders, etc. And as that journey continued, I went to work for a company called AT&T, and it was singular at the time. There were 2 separate companies, but they merged. And I learned probably most of my skill sets from those 12 years of working in retail in different positions. So the podcast, Beyond the Blueprint, is kind of like taking things to a different perspective or level, and using different, we'll call it, significant stories or milestones or timelines of what I've learned over, the last, we'll call it 20 years of being in retail, customer service, and sales, and sharing that with other people. And then obviously I took a big jump. I jumped ship from W-2, consistent paycheck, to not getting paid at all unless I close mortgages. So the whole vision behind Beyond the Blueprint is to help educate and teach and motivate people to get outside of the shell and outside the box thinking, so that way they could grow and be successful in their careers. I would say the biggest learning experience is, number one, equipment. I've had the equipment here for years, never used it, never learned how to use it. But I would also say is how to deliver a message. And I'm still learning on that and hopefully getting better as we do these. I wish I did it a lot sooner. However, when things were crazy during COVID and the office wasn't built, and then obviously being really busy, is the number one thing I always tell people is there's always enough time in the day to make room for either personal growth, self-growth, family, whatever it might be, is that you have to make the time to do it. In your career or personal life, what has been the most challenging obstacle you face, and how did you overcome it? So this is a good little story. So as I said before, I worked for AT&T. I was a sales manager, and the little story about how I got into mortgages was I had a short sale in Connecticut. I was living in Florida, obviously with Melissa and our family, and I got a mortgage for our first home together here in Naples, Florida. And I had to go to a bank and do almost, not a private mortgage, but basically a portfolio mortgage because of the short sale. And I was in an adjustable rate mortgage. Well, the 5 years was coming up, and that 4% rate could be 6%, 7%, whatever the indexes were back then. So it was time to refinance. And that's how, I met Glenn, who owns Premier Mortgage. And we were having a conversation, and I was working for AT&T, and I was like, hey, what is it like doing mortgages? My curiosity, I was intrigued by it. And then we had a conversation, and it was just like, hey, you got to take a test, and it's a 20-hour program, and you got to pass a test that not many people do, at least on their first try. And then you help buyers get mortgages for homes or refinance their home like you're doing now. And I would say, after passing, because I failed the first time, I talked about that in one of my first episodes. But after I passed and I found a new passion with the skill sets I've learned of customer service and helping people by doing it in a way for them to get keys to their house or save money on their current mortgage by doing a refinance, is I had to take basically a leap of faith, right? So it came to a point where I was like, I can't do both jobs at the same time. And I remember sitting outside in the parking lot, calling Fidelity to see, all right, how much money do I have that I could pull out of my retirement for reserves as I make a transition from, W-2 with a company to going self-employed 1099. And it was pretty chilling and scary. And I remember Melissa and I talking about it, and she's like, you could do this, you got this. And she was super supportive over it. And I had no choice but to do it and be successful at it. And I would say the biggest thing there is, a big test of resilience for sure, but also learning and developing things in a different spectrum. And I had to. I didn't have a choice. I had to figure out, how can I grow a business? And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to do so. But once it happened, it was like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe I didn't do this 20 years ago, right? I guess in the market you could say I'm newer, but I've figured it out, and thankfully and very blessed to say that I've helped over, 400-500 people get into a home. But the message there is that you got to have determination, you got to be motivated, you got to be disciplined, and you could do it. Because if I just gave up or just couldn't figure it out, just like a lot of people that are in the real estate industry, they go back to Ubering or doing other jobs because they didn't stick to it and they didn't think outside the box or beyond the blueprint. Third question: if you could interview any person, living or dead, on their podcast, who would it be and what would you ask them? That's a good question. There's a lot of people I like and who I like to interview, but to keep it more general is I like to interview and learn from successful self-employed people. And I think that's what we're going to be doing moving forward, starting in February. Got a really exciting one lined up for the end of the month. But learning from how they created a company, right? And I've heard the cliche, and I'm sure you have too, is you wrote it down on a piece of paper, and now a multi-million-dollar company. I want to hear those stories and share those stories because I think it's powerful that a lot of the companies that we all recognize and know, for example, Apple, that started in the garage. In the garage. Can you imagine? And now we use all that technology and it's a bazillion whatever worth company. Is that if I could interview anybody, it's going to be those who have gone through the resilience, have taken the steps backwards, have fallen flat on their face, but listening to how they transformed an idea and made it into something really, really big and powerful. And I think that's where I would go with that. Number 4, what's a piece of advice you often find yourself giving but find challenging to follow in your own life? Consistency. I think that's a big one. I think when we think of consistency, and everyone probably has a different definition of the outcome of that, is being able to do something or produce something and doing it in a manner that's not sporadic. That's Matt's definition of it. And I think that's difficult because I even realize myself is that I go through spurts sometimes where I'm like posting videos on social media, and then I disappear for a minute, and then I'm like, whoa, I got to get back in the game. And I talk to a lot of other people too, and I'm like, man, you're doing a lot. I see your stuff, and all of a sudden they disappear, and I'm like, where'd you go? What happened? Oh, I got to be more consistent. Right. So I think consistency is a very big challenge for everybody because shit happens, right? Things pop up, and you were supposed to do an interview or make a phone call or talk to a client, but then something happened. You got to go get your kid from school, or there's practice, or a life event happens, and there's a lot of things that get thrown in your way that can throw your consistency off. If you look at like professional athletes, right? I think it was either Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan. I was listening to on ESPN, like a documentary, saying how, the difference, it was Kobe Bryant, because it was waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, doing a practice, 5 o'clock in the morning practice, 6 o'clock, eat, like practicing every single day throughout the day. And that was consistent 100% of the time. And that's obviously how he was such an amazing basketball player. And I think the same goes for everybody else, is that the people that are consistent, they're the ones driving the success around them. And just like your favorite podcast, like if you listen to the Joe Rogan Experience or whatever it might be, it's consistent. It comes out and it's a consistent base, and people look forward to that. Just like if you're into, the local 6 o'clock news. Well, what if it only came on like twice a week, but you didn't know what days, and you were really into it, and for some reason you wanted to watch it? Well, that wouldn't be good. It's not consistent. So I think the message here is consistency is key, not meaning that you have to do a post every single day or work out every single day, but you have to be consistent at it and not let go of it, because when you do, then it becomes basically dust in the wind. That's probably the easiest way of saying it. And I think that sometimes we all fall into that trap, me included, is that you have to be consistent in the things you do, because when you are and you do it, it only makes you better. So those are the 4 questions that I could ask, sporadically here or there, but I just wanted to share with everybody because I think it's important that, everybody learns from each other and knows from each other. And I will tell you this, is that I went from basically a lone originator, not knowing anything, to building a multi-million-dollar company. That's the easiest way of doing it. And a lot of it's come through social media, networking, making relationships, but also giving value and helping other people. So if you're out there and you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, be consistent. Like if you're selling Yeti cups, tumblers, whatever, you should be posting all the time, reaching out to the people around you, so that way somebody's not buying a Stanley cup from Stanley or whatever. You should say, the first time I saw that, I was like, what does that have to do with hockey? And then I remembered back in the day, Melissa was telling me the Stanley Cup. You remember? I was like, oh, yeah. So it's really just about being consistent, taking the steps that you put forward, and then giving it your best every single time you do it. And if you give it your best every single time you do it, you're only going to get better every single time you do it. So that's my message there. Hopefully, that's cool with everybody. I'm glad you stay tuned if you did, and I appreciate all of you. And I'm looking forward to a great 2024, as I said before. And I hope everybody out there is healthy and prosperous in what you're doing. And I look forward to talking with you guys soon. And thanks for listening to Beyond the Blueprint with Matt.
You've been listening to Beyond the Blueprint with Matt. Matt's passion is to talk about breaking the mold and exploring the uncharted territories of mortgages, real estate, faith, marketing, coaching, and so much more. Helping to show you there's always a way forward. Thanks so much for listening to the show. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, you can find us on YouTube and Facebook and on all the major podcast channels at Beyond the Blueprint. See you next time.